Welcome back to another episode of WithSONAR. We are live from our homes, another edition, not in the office, but we should be back in the office next week. And Kyle, thanks for jumping on with me. I'm going to divert to you so people don't realize I'm streaming this from my office closet.
We talk about authenticity, and this is about as authentic as you can get. Luke can easily, when he gets cold, grab a sweater, grab a new shirt, grab anything he wants at his disposal, and that's isn't that right? Like, you could probably have 3 shirts. The dude would probably be super proud of you when he was going through wardrobe changes during FreightWaves Live, and no one noticed.
This is true. I could have a wardrobe change every single call. Nobody's gonna know it. It's great. Plus, also, you know, I run a side business here in the dry cleaning space, but we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, they just come to the window, they drop it off, and then it's really quick, bang, bang. Here you go. We're on to the next one.
That's it. If you can see the light behind me, it's not a light; it's actually a window. So I do have a window, you know, little walkthrough station, if you will.
No, that's awesome. So last week you were coming to us from the beach. I hope your vacation was fine. Looks like you're just as pale as when you left. So I hope it was a great time.
Yeah, it was lovely. Although it was a bit overcast. There was not much sun. I only had sun one day, so that could partially be due to the lack of sun on my face. But no worries. It was always good to get away. But hey, let's jump in. You know, we got a lot to talk about today. Okay, and
huge week this week.
Huge week. And I don't want to say I told you so, but we told you so. I mean, am I allowed to say that?
If you watched us 2 weeks ago, and we saw the comments. We read the comments. We saw the comments. Sonar is just it doesn't really help me out. It's not really gonna tell me what it's actually gonna complicate things, because
rates aren't going down.
Yeah, it's coming from the future. And
yeah. In fact,
unfortunately,
people
you didn't believe us.
People were even saying, no, rates are going to go up from where they were 15 days ago. Now, don't get me wrong. We had a few believers out there. There were a few people who were like, you know what? I think you're onto something here. And you can talk to that later. You've got some good examples, especially on the LA to Dallas lane, which we'll get more into later. But for folks that are just now tuning in, what we're talking about is last week when we were talking here. That's a great full shot of my closet, so now you can see what I wear on a regular basis. But no, seriously, what we were talking about last week, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, is we were starting to see a decline in tender rejections, which was implying carriers were less reliant on the spot market, and therefore they were willing to accept more of their contracted tenders, and that takes volume off of the spot market. So that was going to cause rates to drop, and that's when we were telling carrier or brokers 2 weeks ago that you're overpaying if you're still paying those same premiums, and you need to push rates down. And right, Kyle, I think we've got a lot of things that are now all of a sudden coming to fruition that are making our words come more and more true every day.
Right. And our guy, Dane Adams, who never really gave me a judge of how we were doing last week on a 1 to 10, is back in the comment section coming at us live with, this seems like an episode of South Park. Yeah, this may be a little bit of an episode of South Park, because we're going to drop some knowledge on you that no one else is going to talk about. So you are correct. We are talking about the future. And what we talked about last week, for those who weren't present, which was, as soon as what we saw within our tender data, is that volumes were starting to drop, as we normally see, but rejections were really starting to come back down. They just weren't reflective in the invoice data, that is the spot load boards reporting their rate per miles. And so as we talk through that, what are we starting to see now? We're starting to see the huge drop in rates this week. And it's really becoming a frenzy out there of just, how low can I push my carrier rates down? And unfortunately, carriers are just they're holding the burden of, you know, how long can I keep these rates up? But they're weakening. Those knees are shaking. Those rates are coming down, Luke. I mean, that's what I'm seeing, and that's what we've got validation on as well.
They're definitely coming down. Now, that's not to say, folks, that rates are at a bottom or they're going to hit a bottom. We can't say that. Right? Things are still extremely elevated. Tender rejections are still very elevated from where they were this time last year. But that is not to say that over the last 30 days, things have softened quite a bit. And we were calling that weeks ago, right? And now you're finally starting to see that show up in rates now that everybody else has figured that out. And that's something, that's a trend that we continue to see, of course. And we'd really like to see, because also some of the drivers, right, carries as well. Now's a great time, now that they're starting to realize that rates coming out. Now's a great time to lock in new contracts if you haven't already. I know some
Right.
already have, but like, if rates are going to continue to go down, lock in those contracts now if you can. It's a great time. You can still save your shippers a little bit money, make it look like you're doing them a favor. And then if rates continue to go down, you've already got some good things locked in. So, carriers can still come out of this on top too. It's not just the brokers that are going to come out on top, but it's all about, making those decisions quickly now that you know which direction things are moving.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And there's a couple things to this. I mean, let's slow down a little bit and really try to understand what are the ripple effects of this softening that's going to occur. So one, we talked to a ton of shippers that redid those RFPs back in December. And a lot of them haven't even gone live yet. And at the moment, and this is even companies that we're talking to right now, those rates are reflected on December spot rates. And so the fact that we're already starting to see the softening and a lot of these lanes haven't even gone live yet, one, you're going to have brokers just oozing at the mouth. They're going to be slobbering because all I can see is, man, I negotiated high rates with my shippers. Carrier rates are starting to plummet. Margins are going to be huge. The second point to that is that our buyers, which is our shippers and our carriers, because really they're selling their services, are going to have to come to an agreement. I think in the more short term, being the end of the quarter, as they start recognizing that this softening has occurred and they don't want to be taken advantage of. And so we're going to see that, and those shippers that really live and die by those annual contracts, I think are going to start thinking of a different strategy come here a couple months. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and actually something that I think would be good to show is let's actually go ahead and throw on that chart that we just had a second ago on the screen, and we could talk about a visual here. So what you can see here that tender rejections. Notice the blue line for a moment. Tender rejections are at their lowest point that they've been since the middle of August. Right? They're at their lowest point since the middle of August. Still at 22%, very elevated, but they have fallen off of that peak of around 28% very quickly. And notice the orange line now. That's the average spot rate per mile according to TruckStop in the United States. It's taken almost a week for that to start dropping after tender rejections started dropping, right? So that's kind of where we're talking. It takes things a lot of time. So, you can use that to your advantage, because as tender rejections start dropping, right, that's the time to lock in those contracts. And that's where carriers can come out on top of this, right? And with brokers, right, same thing, right? You're pushing rates down when you see that blue line drop down. And we may continue to see that happen.
And to put it in perspective, we're seeing average for the national average for tender rejections is at 22% right now. The last time we saw that number was mid-August. So it has been almost 6 months, pretty much been 6 months since the last time that number's been that. And so that it's really starting to portray a message of exactly what's happening. Rates are falling. And to think about where we get this information from, let's be real. All right, so the rate per mile that you get from load boards is invoice data. It is a couple weeks old, so it does have a little bit of a lag, but it's taking an average of what carriers and brokers and shippers are paying in the market. Those naturally are delayed just based off where they get the information. Now, that tender information that we provide that's proprietary to Sonar is from the front of the transaction, not the back. So we're seeing actual loads that are being rejected right now. And so when you saw that hump right at towards the end of the year going into 2021, those were loads that were going to be that were being accepted at that moment. And it takes about a week or 2 weeks for that to be replicated into the load board data sets. And so it makes a lot of sense why this is a true signal. This is something that is proactively telling you what's happening so that you can start changing your thought process and start reacting differently to the market. And as we see it in that orange line, it came down real fast as soon as those invoices started to shape up. And I mean, you love to see it as a broker. You hate to see it if you negotiated your race last month because you're like, holy crap. It's that time, Luke, that I sold Tesla a little too early when I should have held on. That was me selling Bitcoin back at 5,000 and it's now up to 400 or 40,000. That's exactly the same situation that's happening now.
Hey, we're all rich in the past. You know how it is, right? Hopefully we'll be rich in the future too, right? But no, this.
So this is exactly what's kind of going. And so I think Luke's having a little bit of audio issues. So fortunately for you all, you get to hear a little bit of Kyle a little further. And so, how do you react to this? How, as a carrier, how do you continue to push back on these brokers that are probably really trying to push down on your rates? And it's really just trying to lock in long-term rate. When things are falling, you want to get long-term rates. And so it would be going back to your brokers and just trying to have that conversation. If you have no data to really support what's happening, then there's nothing for you to be able to negotiate besides just, oh, well, maybe some load postings or some commentary from your friends that are like, oh yeah, I got a load for, couple 3,000 the other day. Outside of that, there's nothing for you to point to negotiate your position. This is really the only way to do so. And so this can really help you try to just have that conversation to keep something consistent right now, because it is tumbling fast. And if we all know what the snowball effect is, that ball is going to get larger and larger as it falls, which means your rates are going to continue to drop. And profitability, which was just getting ripe for carriers. We saw it with our TCA data. We saw operating ratios really drastically dropping compared to where they were 6 months, which was really notifying us that carriers are finally printing money. And so right when that started happening, we're starting to see that snowball back down. But let me check back in with Luke here to see if he's back on with us. But I think he's still gone. But what we can do now is let's jump to a quick map. So let's go to the rejections map that we had. And so what we're going to pull up in Sonar is, this is using our great maps and that tender data, and we're going to look at rejections on a market level. So from a market level, this is going to see what is the changes in tender rejections over the past week. So the blues are going to tell me that there's been an increase in tender rejections. Red is going to tell me that there's been a decrease in tender rejections. And so there's a lot, it's a kind of a mixed bag here, and really some of it really relying on the refrigerated market. So this is taking into effect of both van and reefer. Reefer really still driving up the market right now. I think it's still in the mid 40s on average rejected freight. But this right here really just lets you know that it still is, it's regional. It's where your focus point is. And so a lot of different areas are red that are going to show a lowering in rejection. So that's where this on a market level can really be a benefit, because it either hits you or it doesn't. When we all saw COVID starting to get back into it, or when we saw COVID really starting to hit last April, one of the biggest things was our customer base was, I have zero freight because I'm just not exposed to these big consumer packaged good customers that are really printing their money right now. They can't get rid of their product fast enough. Whereas some of their other customers are having record years because they just are getting those spot loads from their customers because they were just positioned right. So depending on how you're positioned, this can either help you or hurt you. And so that's, one of the great reasons why having this would definitely benefit you on that perspective. And looks like William is back in the comments. William, glad you're back this week. William said these rates were bound to happen, seasonal, but when you forecast for rates out over the next few weeks but what's your forecast on rates over the next few weeks / month? Let's assume stimulus. That's a great point. So let me just take a second. So assuming stimulus, and so we would still see that consumer spending would continue to maintain, meaning that products are continuing to be purchased. Would assume that volumes would stay consistent. And so if we're assuming that volume stayed consistent, I think rates would continue to drop a little bit, but there would be a floor, not a drastic drop like what we saw back at when the quarantine happened and we weren't able to really purchase a lot. But so I still think that rates are going to have a long way to go. But one thing to also think, William, is that we're going to have a lot of contracted freight starting to enter back into the markets. All of these RFPs that were done at the end of last year, that were negotiated with based off of December rates, pretty much, they're going to be going into effect. And so with that happening, we are going to see rejections start to come down over time as those get renegotiated, because primary tender acceptances are one of the biggest metrics for shippers, and that's where they go. That and service, that's what they monitor. So monitoring those, and Amazon being one of them, I would assume that we would start to see that rejection number fall a little bit, but I think it's really going to be dictated off the volumes. And look out, everyone! We got the man, the myth, the legend back with us. I had to give Kyle his due here and let everyone know that it was the Kyle show for a second.
Hey, you know how it is. I like to let you shine from time to time. You were doing good. I apologize here, folks. I'm working off of my phone here because my computer's audio settings are broken, of course. Computer audio is broken. Talking out of a closet, man, things are just not looking too hot for me over here. But we make it work. Okay, freight never sleeps. Okay, this closet didn't get filled without trucks moving. So, no, if I heard correctly, I heard some of that, Kyle, while I was trying to get back in. So I think we were talking a little bit, and I think William was putting some things in the comments here about where rates are forecasted to go, because I think he's right. Seasonally, this is typically a softer time. But we've been looking at a few things as well that look like there might be a potential bounce coming on a few lanes as well, particularly out of Dallas, or potentially out of Dallas in the near future. Have you heard something similar? Because it looks like capacity is tightening back up out of Dallas.
Yeah, no, that is the only place in all of Texas that we're seeing that currently happen. So Dallas that's occurring. And I think to throw something up, if we could put up the map of the volume changes, that'll probably help us validate what's going on as well. So it looks like, actually, interestingly, we are seeing volumes increase week over week. So just like with the rejections map, this week over week change on volumes is going to showcase red if there's been a lowering of volume, blue if there's been an increase in volume. And so West Texas seems to really start to jack up a little bit, and also into Arizona. And so to your point, Luke, looks like Dallas is kind of maintaining there. It's a white, meaning not a lot of big changes. Dallas has really been the needle mover for a lot of markets, not only just for people that were moving. We've seen a lot of corporations from the West Coast, Silicon Valley, start to reposition their own assets to the Texas markets. Obviously, get rid of a little bit of tax, and you're able to position yourself a little bit better for a lifestyle perspective, just on the cost of living. But what that also does is, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, keep in mind with that too, Dallas, we don't have it here. This is simply, all this is looking at is the outbound volume. So the outbound volume has remained flat out of Dallas, maybe a very slight tick up. But the inbound volume, which is not represented here, has actually started to take a pretty significant decline by about 10% over the last 30 days. So if you have outbound volumes remaining level or a slight uptick, but inbound volumes are coming down, that's going to tighten up capacity, because now all of a sudden you have less carriers going into that market to resupply what ultimately shippers need to, get covered to ship out of that market. And that's something that we really need to keep an eye on. However, rates haven't started going back up yet, or haven't found a floor yet in Dallas, but they might in the near future. And that's a market I would keep an eye on, to where if that trend continues, and the inbound volumes can remain suppressed while outbound volumes remain elevated, I think you could potentially see folks figure that out and carriers start asking for more money out of Dallas. We'll see.
Yeah.
Good
No,
one to keep
I
an eye on.
definitely can get behind that. And so I want to give a shout out to one of our customer base. So Garrett Lacey, who comes from Ally Logistics, he reached out to me earlier this week just to kind of validate the helpfulness of the data that we had and what's happening on the street. So not only are we seeing volumes start to slowly come down, but it's easier, and companies are lowering that cost to service their loads. And I think that's the biggest thing, Luke, with a lot of the carriers and brokers, is that what is the cost to service your load? Meaning, how much labor and time have you put into just trying to get this covered? And we are seeing that cost is starting to come down, meaning I didn't have to do that many phone calls to get that covered. Maybe I was just able to post it and a carrier called me. I didn't have to do much work. I was able to negotiate harder. I think that's really what that needle moving next metric is really going to be coming down the pipe. What do you have maybe as you forecast out? I'm just trying to think, as we got a new president entering the market or entering the White House this week, potentially more legislation around a potential another stimulus, but that really just tells me that we just want to maintain the buying habits that we currently are in.
Exactly. And that's another good point. If those stimulus checks, if those do go out and they are significantly larger than what we've seen in the past, that could potentially instigate another buying frenzy for folks, which could ultimately put a little more freight out there again, like we've seen before. Ultimately, time will tell if that happens, but that's something else to definitely consider. It'll take a little time for that to trickle though down. As those stimulus checks, they don't hit everybody all at once, but that could definitely be supportive there for a little while, assuming that does happen. And also shout out to, this is not a political statement at all, but shout out to the White House for adding a dark mode on their website. Big fan of that. I like websites that you can change the theme to a dark colors. It's not as bright on the eyes, which by the way you can do in Sonar. Just want to throw that out there. Go Sonar.
Yes.
Segue.
There you go. Little segue. It's not with Sonar unless there was some sort of segue. So that was perfectly placed in exactly what the people needed in their life right now. And to your point, I'm really interested to see how the data will change and how the rates will change. I know our forecast, which is Sonar is the only place where you can actually receive a forecast. We're seeing not drastic changes, but over the next quarter, about an average of a 5% decrease is what we're kind of expecting across the board. Some of them higher than others, but that's probably about average for what we're seeing. And one of the big things that I really want to bring up right now, Luke, is imports. We got the Chinese holiday or Chinese New Year is going to be hitting, I think, on the 14th of February. And so we should start to see a little bit of a pull forward before that actually happens, which should give us maybe a temporary inflation coming into the California markets. But that's just kind of anecdotally what I could assume would happen.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some truth to that, and we'll have to see exactly how that plays out. But typically, what happens is everybody is, for those that aren't aware, is when Chinese New Year does happen, right? Everything in China or most of the ports shut down, and imports take an absolute nosedive for about a week. Now that's normal. That happens. We expect that. So really, the question is going to be: do they pull it forward, or do they wait until after the New Year's? And I think that's something we're gonna have to figure out. Now, the nice thing is we can look at this. We don't have this here in front of us right now to show you, but maybe this is something we look at next week. We look at the bookings data on the ocean side of the Sonar, and that'll give us that answer, because we can see that bookings data a week before it's loaded on ships at foreign ports, and that'll give us the exact answer if they're pulling freight forward or they're waiting until after the Chinese New Year's.
Right. No, exactly. That's going to be extremely interesting, because we know that 80% of truckload comes from a port. It comes from a steamship. And so as that teeters into that inflationary just pull forward, we'll kind of see how that starts to ramp things up. And obviously, any kind of changes that the White House makes could have some sort of effect on the trade that we have within the United States and how goods are moved from point A to point B. But to kind of summarize, in case we got anyone just jumping on now, I see we got 16 people on here. We told you so. Rates are deflating. We are seeing that. We called it 2 weeks ago. We saw it within the tender data, and that's really going to be a theme. If you're not being proactive with your customers, if you're not trying to see what's going to change besides just a load to truck ratio or a specific anecdotal evidence, you're kind of in the past. You're going to see people just leap and bound over you, just telling you, okay, well, now I can get it cheaper. I can't wait to see that competition come back in the brokerage market, where now you're going to have other brokers underscore you because the markets are softening. It's a great opportunity for brokers to come in and say, hey, I can get it for you cheaper. You negotiated that contract rate really high.
It's the why behind the what, right? It's telling, like, anybody can give somebody a rate, right? A broker can tell a carrier a rate. A carrier can tell a shipper a rate. At the end of the day, that's all it is a rate. It doesn't tell a story. You have to be able to tell the why behind the what. If brokers want to pay carriers less and keep that relationship strong with their carriers, they have to give them a little bit more, right? They can't just be like, well, the market's down. That's not helpful, right? Carriers have bills to pay too, so they need to understand that these brokers are taking care of them and that they're being truthful and transparent, right? So that way they can show them this information. They can show them the why behind the what, right? And then the flip side, when things are going back up, right? On the same thing, the carriers, they can then justify, hey, here's why I need a little more money today. This is my why. And also for folks watching on the website, I know if you're wondering how you can communicate with Kyle and I during the show, most of our viewers are online on FreightWaves.com. That's where they view the show. We get about 1,000 viewers there. If you want to go to the FreightWaves LinkedIn page or the FreightWaves Facebook page, we do live stream the show there. So if you want to have questions to ask us during the show or topics you want us to cover, go to our LinkedIn or Facebook page and you can put those comments in. And that's what Kyle is monitoring during this show. So if you're on our website, that's where you can go to communicate with Kyle and I. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. I agree with that 100%. I think, it's all about that transparency there. And I think we're going to continue to see, I think we're just going to see trends different. I think there's going to be lanes that are going to be higher than they probably historically have run, and lanes that are going to be lower than they historically have run as supply chains continue to just change and we find this new normal and whatever that looks like.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely spot on, and definitely what we're seeing. And an interesting concept, and I know we got to button it up a little bit, but on our Facebook page, Jason Moyes, our data is an illusion. It's fabricated. It's non-validated.
You're right, Jason. We just make it up. We just make pretty charts.
No, but it's continue to validate. It's no matter what you're doing, as long as you're measuring yourself by something and not just by what you see on different groups that we have on Facebook, you're going to be ahead of the group. Or if you're okay doing the same A/B lane that you do all the time, that's awesome. Our data may not fit with what you're doing right there, but what we do know is that 25% of the top 100 carriers use it. Half of the top 100 brokers use it. There's well over 400 customers that are using this to validate, and
we got tons of owner ops and small brokers as well using it. I mean, there's a small 4-truck carrier the other day who told Larry here on our sales team that after he got Sonar, he was able to increase the revenue on his trucks by something like 25%. So, there's great success stories all around. Not just from the big guys that use Sonar, but also from the smaller guys. So, it's a game that everybody can win from, right? It's not, only one group or only one size can win, which is really exciting. I like that a lot, right? But I know we're getting close here towards the end. We only have a few seconds left. Folks, thank you so much for joining us on WithSONAR today. And if you can, and thank you for bearing with us during some of the technicals. We will be back next week in the office, full steam ahead. Have a fantastic week and see you next week.